Hi, thanks for joining me once again for a free painting lesson. I'm Wilson Bickford. I'm a professional artist, author, and painting instructor, and I'm going to show you some little tricks today to churn out your own little winter scene painting. I'm from northern New York, so I know all about snow. I know the beauty of snow. I enjoy the winters as much as I can by doing some snowshoeing and taking photos of the surroundings of the beautiful snowscapes. So I'm going to share some of that with you today. I wanted to mention too, on my palette, I'm using my signature palette today, which is the Wilson Bickford Signature series. I've designed this with an ergonomic hand grip. I've also added some holes to facilitate some of the brushes. These are sized to some of my smaller brushes that will fit in here rather than having them roll around on the table all the time. So I just wanted to share that with you. This is a nice palette. It's white, so it's very easy to mix your colors on. I prefer a white background versus gray or just a typical wooden palette. For simplicity's sake today for the filming though, I'm going to put this down here on the table so I'm not moving the palette around. It'll be a stationary view for you so you can see exactly what I'm mixing as I'm mixing it as the cameras pull in on that. I won't actually need these particular brushes, so I'll set those to the side. What I have planned today is a very simple painting. I've got 4 colors and I'm going to use 2 brushes. My 2-inch scenery brush and my number 3 fan brush. I do have a script liner here because I will touch on the end, show you how to sign your painting with a brush. A lot of people ask about that, how to put their signature on their painting. So I'll show you that. On my palette today I have some of my signature oils. These oils are very thick and full-bodied. They're made for wet-on-wet application. They're very thick and pasty, as it were. But the idea is you can thin paint down and put thinner paint over the top of these thicker foundation layers once we get rolling with it. So that's the beauty of it. When you're working wet on wet, it's very important to have a nice, thick, firm-bodied paint like this. What I'm using today is ultramarine blue, Van Dyke brown, emerald green hue, and titanium white. I'm also going to be using some of my signature fast flow white medium, which is a base coat that I'm going to apply over the whole canvas. It allows me to get blendability and soft edges where I require them. Makes the paint flow onto the canvas a lot easier. I have some of that squirted out on a small disposable paper sheet down here. I also have some of my Bickford Fast Flow clear medium. If paints need to be thinned down as I progress in this painting, I can dab into that and use that to thin my consistency of my paints down. So, and I'm using a one of my signature canvas panels for this. These are MDF core, like masonite. They're not the typical cardboard center cellulose type variety. Very archival, very resistant to warping. So I'm proud to offer those as well. Okay, let's do a little painting here. I'm thinking something kind of in the blue-gray range, kind of cold and wintry. I've been doing a lot of warmer scenes on some of these free painting lessons that I've been doing, so I thought maybe we'd do something a little on the cooler side with blues and grays. I'm going to take a little bit of this fast flow white medium on my 2-inch scenery brush. I'm going to put a nice thin coat over this whole canvas. Now you might not be able to tell there at home, but I can tell by the glare from the studio lights on this canvas what is the correct application. Basically you just want to scrub in a very thin coat. Your board will look a little bit shiny where you've applied the paint and dull where it's not. Actually, let's go a step further and do this. I think this will be a great idea. If I can get the studio lights and get the cameras on this just right, you might be able to see a shine on that in certain spots and a dull area. You can see where I've put that. It's a little shiny here. It's a little duller down here. Not sure if that's showing up, but we'll try that. Sometimes you rotate that in the light, it's easy to see. But basically you want to look for a nice subtle shine over the whole surface and get that evenly distributed. Another way you can check that is to just touch it with your fingertips. Make sure that you're actually getting a little bit of paint on your fingertips. It doesn't take as much as you think. A lot of people will tend to put this medium on way too heavily. Notice that you can't see any brush strokes within this paint film. I've got it scrubbed right into the tooth of the canvas. And like I said, this just facilitates the spread of the other layers that we're going to put on. It gives you blendability. If you're a watercolorist, this is like using damp paper to apply your color. It'll soften your edges where you want softness. And I do want some softness in this. I have a little idea in my head. I might switch gears in at midstream. You never know. I'm just going to paint what comes out of me, and something reminiscent of my neck of the woods where I live in northern New York State. Okay, I'm going to take some ultramarine blue, a little bit of the Van Dyke brown into that to dull it and gray it somewhat. What I'm cooking up here is my sky color. Maybe a little bit of white if it's too dark. I just want to get something that's kind of a blue-gray sky color. I'm thinking kind of cool and wintry. Work it in evenly into the brush so there's no streaks or chunks on the ends of the bristles. And I'm thinking there's going to be a horizon line in here, maybe somewhere down about here, give or take, with maybe a meadow in front here and then some background and trees. So I'm just kind of giving you a map there to see what I'm seeing in my head. I'm just kind of winging this more or less. Once you start to paint, you're able to do that. You can kind of envision scenes and compositions in your head and then just throw them onto the canvas, which is a really nice way to go about it. It's total freedom. You can just kind of do it, and anything you can dream up, you can slap on canvas, and that's what makes it fun. Okay, so see, if I don't paint that solidly like I would a wall, if I leave it blotchy like that, it looks like it has atmosphere and depth in it, some cloud movements. So it looks like a pretty menacing sky. I'm planning on having some snow in this anyway, some falling snow later on, so I want it to look kind of stormy and cold and wintry, just like I said. I'm going to wipe this brush off. Like I said at the outset, I'm only going to use these two brushes. I can accomplish a lot with these two brushes. You will be surprised. I'm going to take this brush and wipe it off, and I'm going to come back and just use a broad X stroke like this, just to kind of soften everything out. You'll see that the brush marks become less evident, and everything gets kind of blurry and soft looking, more like a sky, not like brush strokes. It's exactly what I wanted. And see that white base coat, that's what that's for. That's the job that does. All right, that's looking pretty good. See, that looks like a sky. Like I said, if I paint it just flat blue, it's going to look flat like the wall here behind me. So the key is not to make it too solid. I'm going to lay that brush to the side for just a second. And I'm going to take a little bit of that color that's already here on my palette. If you've painted with me before, you know that I'm notorious for just building one color off the next. I'm going to use this as a base. I'm going to need a little more of that. I'm trying to save some of that for snow shadows later on, so I just need a little more of it. But in theory, I'm using basically the same color. It's just the blue, a little bit of white, a little bit of the brown. But into that, I'm going to put just a little touch of this emerald green. Emerald green is a great color, but it's pretty strong, so I just need a little pinch of that. I want to get something that's kind of a gray-green for some distant trees way back here. And it's like making soup. If I'm mixing up a big batch of soup here with a ladle, I have to taste that every now and then, see if it needs a little pinch of this or a little dash of that. So I'm actually going to put some up here on my canvas and see what I think. Actually, that looks pretty good for what I want. So I'm thinking that there's going to be a tree line way back here. Notice I've got it running uphill. In my neck of the woods, there's a lot of hills. We live at the basically in the foothills of the Adirondack Mountains. So we have a lot of rolling land and hills. And besides that, it's pretty boring if you just put your line in straight. So what I'm doing is just establishing this against the meadow that's going to be in the foreground. And then I'm going to tap the brush open, so it's really loose. And if I just use a tapping motion like this, use enough paint so you're getting that really needly texture. I'm hoping that you're seeing that close enough. But this will yield a very fuzzy, needly looking texture for distant trees. And I just incorporate it down into that line that I put through. And you want some variety in it, so you got some ups and downs, and it's just not straight across like a hedge. See, I kind of work the whole canvas. I'll do rather than go all the way across, I kind of work back and forth. That gives me more chance to kind of throw this out of balance. Have a few taller, a few shorter. If I get a little bit of that green down here in the snow area, I'm not worried about it. I can whisk that right out of there with a clean brush, just like nobody's business. Oils are very forgiving, so I recently had an email. Somebody said you just have no fear with the paint, because they had watched me on YouTube and on some of the free art lessons, and they said you have no fear with the paint. I don't know if it's necessarily no fear more than confidence. I think it's just confidence. I know that if I make a mistake, I can correct it. Oil is very forgiving. If I get something on this canvas I don't like, I can literally just take a little bit of thinner on a paper towel and I can just clean this right off and wipe it right off. So I guess it's confidence, that knowing that whatever doesn't work out, I can make it okay in the end. So you have to get over that fear of it. Once that fear leaves you, you're free to wheel and deal and do whatever you want on this canvas. If you haven't tried painting, by the way, this is a great one to start on. This is a very simple painting. We're using 4 colors and 2 brushes. I don't know as we could get it much simpler than that. And we'll have a nice little painting here when we're done. Okay, now see, as I'm talking, I'm just kind of analyzing the ups and downs and making sure it's uneven and natural looking and out of balance. On top of that, I'm going to take a little bit of brown. Trees aren't always green in the wintertime. And if you look at the woods behind my house, a lot of times you'll see little touches of browns and stuff interspersed in between. So I'm going to put a few little touches of that. Now see, I'm just applying it first. This looks terrible. I know, it looks like I just put a blob there. But I'm going to come back and soften that in and blend it. So I kind of put the color on, and then I'll wipe the brush off and fuzz it out. Actually pounce the bristles open, make sure it's open like it was before. And the key is in just kind of mushing that in there. I know mush sounds like a harsh word, but basically I just want it to kind of show a little tinge of a different flavor of color in there. See how that just really sparks that up, and rather than just that green, which would be kind of mundane and lifeless, this adds a lot of extra interest to it. The green is more of a cooler color because it's got some blue in it. This brown is a little bit warmer tone, so it's kind of a temperature change too. A little bit of relief to the eye. If I really wanted to go a little extra, I could just take a little more of the brown. I wouldn't do it everywhere, but I'll make a few little even darker accents here and there. I just apply the color, fuzz the brush out, and then just kind of lightly tap it in. I'm not actually building trees with this color. Notice that it's not holding up as the distinct evergreen shapes that I put in there initially. It's just kind of adding color enhancement to it, just to kind of give the viewer's eye a little something else to take in. It looks natural like that. Like I said, if I look at the woods behind my house, there's a multitude of colors in through there. Okay, so far this is looking pretty good. I want this to look distant, so I'm not worried about any, real strong detail in it or anything. I can actually take the tip of my fan brush handle. If I do a few little scratches like this, if you look in a big fancy art glossary, this is called sgraffito, which is just an Italian Renaissance word, which means that you're scraping away paint, letting the undertone, whatever that happens to be, show through. In this case, it happens to be just plain white canvas. The trick is in doing it loosely and freely so it doesn't look like scratches. If you get something that looks like teeth on a comb, your strokes are too much the same. They're too much the same height and they're spaced too evenly. So this gives you a little faint indication of some tree trunks back against there. Maybe they're beech trees or birch trees, aspens, something with a lighter trunk. But see how that gives it some detail? I'm going to play this area right here up a little more than the rest. If I get that area a little busier, you'll see that it starts becoming a focal point. It's kind of drawing your eye in this area more than the outside edges. Notice I'm not putting that dead center in the middle of the canvas. Compositionally, it's a bad idea to put something that strong right dead center. So I've got this off a little left of center. All right. Now I'm going to wash my fan brush out. In this bucket here I just have some paint thinner, which is just mineral spirits. I'm going to swish that out and wipe this off. I'm going to do something a little different this time. I'm going to take white and some ultramarine blue. I want this to be a little bluer like this. Blue is my favorite color, so I'm not afraid to lean on the blue every now and then. If you wanted to gray that down, you could simply just take a little touch of the brown with it. You're going to have to flavor the colors the way you would like to see them. Painting is a very personal, individual thing, so you have to do it your way. Now, where I said I was going to do something different, we're all used to painting with the end of the brush, just like I've been doing. But a lot of times I paint with the back side of a brush, whether it's a fan brush or a 1-inch brush or whatever, all of them, my round brushes even. Rather than go like this, I'm going to hold the brush and just kind of stamp with the back flat side of the brush. So see how I'm loading it like this on the palette? What I want to do is put the indication of some snow on these trees back here. I'm going to put it in with a blue shadowy tone first, and then I'll come back with something a little whiter. And probably not pure white, because this is kind of an overcast day, so everything's going to be kind of more dull and drab. So the pure white snow is going to be at a minimum. Now this might not be showing up too well on video, I hope it is. But it'll show up a little nicer once I start adding the lighter tones to it. This is kind of a mid-tone over the top of some of that dark I put on there. It's imparting just enough texture where it looks pretty good. It's very convincing as far as branches with snow on them. Okay, now I wiped the brush off. I'm going to take a little more white. Like I said, I'm probably not going to go pure white, but something, the next best thing. And the key is getting enough paint on the back side of that brush. I'm kind of looking for texture. Now you should start to see this a little easier now. These trees are a long ways away, so I'm not really hung up on the detail. That's the beauty of it. Yes, I want it to look like a tree line, but a tree line looks a whole lot different than just individual trees. I'm just going for the overall flow of the whole works. The fact that I'm making this look not quite so spelled out for you is going to enhance the foreground. I've got in mind of putting a tree or two up here in the foreground very close, which is going to push this area back. And the fact that this is not extremely detailed right now is going to enhance that effect. It's an illusion. So if I get every branch and every needle out here, I've got nowhere to go by the time I get to the foreground. And see, by doing that, I knew I was going to lose some of those little scratches. So I can always come back in and put a few more back in over the top of that if I've lost too many of them. But that's an easy way to get a few little details back there. That's really about all I need to do for the background. So I'm going to swish my fan brush out one more time. You know you want to try this, don't you? I bet you do. This is every bit as simple as it looks. Takes a little practice when you're starting out, but you will see that with this approach, you're going to make leaps and bounds in a short order. I'm going to take my fan brush with some more white. I just want to clean up this edge a little bit. Remember I said earlier, don't worry about getting the green down into the metal because we can always whisk it out of there. Well, here I go. I'm whisking it out of here. I just want to clean that edge up a little bit, get a little bit smoother edge there. It kind of pushes the trees over the edge of the knoll a little bit, and it cleans that raggedness up out of the meadow that my brush left behind. Remember, I told you oils are very forgiving, so anything like this that needs to be addressed and cleaned up is easy. Okay. That's looking pretty good for what I wanted so far. Now you could take this as far as you want. I could put another layer of trees in there. There's so many different twists and turns you could do with something like this. It's like I said, it's your call. It's whatever you want to show on your canvas. How involved you want to get with it, how much detail you want. I'm just giving you some pointers on basic places to start with it and certain effects that are achieved through certain techniques. I'm going back to some of this blue-gray shadow color that I had. It was my sky color. Remember I said earlier on I was going to save some of that for my snow shadows? So I'm thinking in terms of like little hills and gullies. So these are little shadow pockets within that snow. So I'm going to leave some white in there. Obviously, it's snow. But notice my strokes go with the lay of the land. This looks like it's coming downhill, so my strokes are going to kind of conform to that. If I came in and did something total opposite, it changes the lay of the land, which I could do that, but I think it's more pleasing to the eye to have that certain flow that's already kind of been established here. And see, I'm just kind of I'm scuffing, putting some lines in there. Now they're going to look kind of like lines and very linear, so I'm going to come back and soften those. Remember that white base coat we put on earlier, and I said it gives us softness where we want it? Well, that's where that's going to come into play. I'm going to take a little more blue into that blue-gray mixture. Just a little bit. I want to change the flavor a little bit. I want to go a little darker and a little bluer here in the foreground. That brings those shadows a little closer, makes this area look even yet a little farther away. Okay. Looking pretty good. I'm going to come back and soften this, which means I'm just going to wipe the brush. Did you ever think you could get this much mileage out of just 2 brushes? A fan brush and a 2-inch brush. I can do this whole thing. Painting doesn't have to be complicated. You can actually strip it down to some bare essentials, a few tools and a handful of techniques and a little bit of knowledge of perspective here and there, and you can actually do some really neat stuff. Okay, I'm going to make one little enhancement. I am going to come back with a clean brush. I washed my fan brush out again. This time I am going to take straight white. It will not stay straight white, and I know that because it's going to blend into some of the underpaint, but I want to go a little bit lighter right in here where I was establishing those trees as being a little more dominant, to kind of play up some sort of a center, not dead center, but a central area here that's going to be kind of a place to draw the viewer's eyes. I'll put a little more light down through the center here. See how that lightens that up just a little bit? Enough to kind of force a little more attention in here. All right. I think we better grab our parka. It looks like it's getting cold out there. I'm going to take a little bit of brown. I can go right into the same mixture that I had before. I'm just taking a little more of the brown into that, darkening it just slightly. Not much paint on the fan brush this time. I'm just tapping the ends of the bristles in. I've really got that brush exploded and widened out. I want to put a little bit of grass peeking up through here and there. So it's just a very light touch to create a little bit of stubble. Now obviously if you've got snow that is knee deep, which many times up in my neck of the woods out behind my house it is, when I break a new trail on my snowshoes and it's knee deep, I'm in trouble. It's a major workout. But if the snow is only maybe ankle deep or not much more than that, you're going to see, you know, a fair amount of grass peeking up through. So you want to look at it realistically and logically. If you're thinking this is deep snow, you probably wouldn't want any grass in here. But I think it kind of actually helps it look even more like snow if we have a little bit of that grass peeking up through here and there. All right. I'm going to wipe my brush and I'm going to mix up a much darker green color. I'm going to put some evergreens in here closer up into the foreground. Now this emerald green, like I said, is a very strong color, so you'll notice I'm taking more blue and brown and less of the green. Again, get a flavor that you like. It just needs to be darker. You could lean it more greenish. You could have a blue green. You could have more of a grayish green. It's all good. It's not the color so much as the value. Value means how light or dark a color is. So you want to get it dark enough. Now that looks really dark, but that's really good. That's what I want. Now to do my evergreens, let me show you here. I'll give you an evergreen lesson. What I do now, this board is dry, so it's not going to go. onto my canvas as easily as my wet one in the background. But you'll get the idea. What I do is I take the brush and I just find a vertical indication of where the trunk would be in that tree. And then I use just the corner. Now, to use just the corner, I can't go in straight like this because I get too wide. It's too much brush. I literally turn the brush like this so it's almost a side, almost like a 45-degree angle of the brush handle to the surface. And then I can get a much smaller little shape like that. The hardest part of the tree is from the top down about a third of the way. Most people have trouble keeping it narrow enough. As long as you keep it narrow at the top, you'll be in business. So see, I just take that corner and I'm just tapping kind of in a loose zigzag back and forth across that center line. As I run out of paint, I flip it over on the other corner where there's more paint before I have to reload. And I go out of my way to make sure it's not perfect. You don't want it to look exactly like a pyramid or a triangle. You want it to be, in and out on each side and staggered in different lengths. On some of the branches, some of them you can hang out a little longer like this. It's not going to be perfect, and it shouldn't be. Mother Nature's a great old gal, but she's not perfect by any stretch. So you don't want to make your trees look too perfect and too much like they've been pruned on the Christmas tree farm all year. All right, so that's the basic idea of that. Now, I know that looks easy when I do that, and it's because it is. It's only because I've done it so long. It does seem easy to me now, but you'll require some practice. Get yourself a piece of cardboard or an older piece of canvas panel, whatever, piece of scrap paper even, something to practice a few of them on. You'll find that your 5th tree will be better than your 1st, and your 15th tree will be better than your 5th. So the more you practice it, the more you're going to like it. Okay, I'm going to say right here. Now see, by this value being so much darker and there's going to be so much more detail in this particular tree, it's going to push this background far away. That's what I was telling you right from the outset. We want that to look a million miles away, so that's why I couldn't put too much detail out there. You have to just downplay your backgrounds. So that's what I've been doing all along to get to this point. This will really bring this out in sharp focus and give me a lot of depth on this flat canvas. All we're trying to do is achieve a sense of depth on a flat surface where there is none. Okay, maybe, what the heck, we'll put another one right here. Excuse me. Now I will eventually lay some snow on these, and I'm thinking I'm going to put some falling snow in. Like we've got a light snowfall coming down, which will kind of really pull this all together and finish it off nicely. Maybe just in the interest of composition, they always say don't put 2 of anything. So maybe if that's the case, rules are made to be broken. It depends on how you have your composition laid out. But I know if I don't do this, some of you are going to question it. So to stave that off, I'm just going to put a 3rd tree over here somewhere. See, I just tap with that same corner. A lot of people I see in class try to do the flippy flop corner to corner. You really don't need to do that. Just use the same corner. The key is in using enough paint. That's very textured. It's because I'm using a lot of paint as I do that. I'm not sure I mentioned it. I was talking as I was doing, but I inadvertently grabbed a little bit of that clear medium too, the fast flow clear, just to thin that down. It helps this paint stick to the thicker paint underneath. You're going to reach a point where you're layering paint on top of paint. It's going to be hard to get each layer to stick to each other. So if it feels like it's not going to stick, that's where you want to thin it down slightly. Okay, now this is kind of overcast, so there's not going to be a lot of sense of cast shadow. So I could probably forego this part altogether. But I'm going to, in the interest of just being a teacher, I'm going to show it to you. Let's say there's a little bit of light coming through from one side or the other. Let's say it's coming through from this way. If that's the case, I would need some sort of a cast shadow. I'll take some of this blue that I used earlier for the snow shadows. I need to darken it a little bit. So I'm going to take a little more blue, a little touch of brown, and just darken it down somewhat. Kind of a blue-gray. And if light's coming from here, it means the shadow from this tree is going to fall on the ground in this direction. Now this is going to look very harsh. These trees will cast a shadow, but since the land is going this way, the shadow will fall on the land uphill because that's the way the land is going. See, that kind of helps set those down and gives them an anchor. I'm going to wipe the brush off, and I'm going to come back and just soften that out. So it's a little softer, much more like a shadow. See how that actually ties the trees down to the ground and makes them look like they are rooted in. And I can put a little bit more of the greenery over the top of that. All right, that's looking pretty good. Makes me want to go snowshoeing. Almost. Actually, winter's coming to an end in my neck of the woods right now, so I'm glad to see that. I'll be glad to see some warmer temperatures and get rid of the snow for a while. But I do enjoy snowshoeing. Okay, let's take a little bit of the firm white here, the titanium white, the thick stuff on my palette. And I'm going to mix a little bit of the fast flow white medium with it to thin it down. Again, it's what I told you before. I'm thinning paint down to go over the top of the thicker stuff. And then I'm going to take a little bit of blue. I'm going to put some shadowed bluish snow. And I'm just comparing my color here before I put it on my canvas. And I'll take a little bit of clear into that to further thin it just a little bit. You will know, your key will be if you go to touch your tree, if the paint doesn't come off the brush and it's lifting green rather than depositing blue, you need to thin this blue color down. See, that's sticking just fine. So I'm just going to kind of randomly dab a little bit of this snow texture on the tree so it looks like it's heavily laden with some fresh snowfall. I just need more of that same overall color, so I'm just mixing a little more up here on my palette. But I just kind of randomly deposit this here and there where I see branches in my mind's eye. Leave a lot of the dark green showing through. Don't just kill all your darks, because then your tree is going to look flat again. It looked flat a moment ago when it was all green. Now it looks like it's got depth within it. The darker greens look like they're further into the tree. This lighter blue comes forward and it makes it look like you got thickness and depth and volume within your tree, which is what we're shooting for, a three-dimensional form. That's what we want on this canvas. See how much different my background reads now? Remember earlier on when it didn't look like much? Now it takes its rightful spot. It looks perfect for what we wanted. Okay, one last little thing, a couple last little things really. I'm going to wash my brush out again. And you believe we got all that out of just 2 brushes so far. That's the nice part. I'm going to take a little bit of the titanium white, a little bit of the fast flow white medium, quite a bit of paint on the brush, and I am going to lighten my highlights on my foreground trees here with some white snow. I don't want to do it to the point of saturation and overkill, but I'm just going to add a few little lighter touches. And then we're going to let it snow. So basically I'm just doing the same thing as I did before, but just don't overdo it. I find a lot of times in my classes my students tend to want to over highlight everything. Highlighting, I always tell them, is the icing on the cake. Less is more. A little bit of something usually looks pretty good. A lot of it is just too much and it's overkill. So notice I'm being very sparing with this lightest color. Doesn't take much to say what I want it to. All right. Now I'm going to take my fan brush. I'm going to swish it out because I picked up some of the dirt color off the trees there, the greens and the blues. So I want to start fresh. I'm going to wash this out. I'm going to take some of the fast flow white medium. I'm actually going to use some of the paint thinner in my bucket. This clear medium is great for thinning the paints down to a certain degree, but it's nowhere near as thin as what the actual paint thinner is that I clean my brushes with. So I'm actually going to dip in and get a little bit of that to further thin it, and I'm going to spatter, which means I'm going to get the paint to a consistency thin enough. If you come right down here on the palette with me, I'm going to show you against this green, darker background. What I want to do is be able to take the brush like this and just release the bristles, let them snap, and I get this dotted random effect. A lot of people use a toothbrush for that. Toothbrush would work great too. I like a fan because I can control the fan because of the shape of it. Where I release those bristles, they tend to go more in a line, and I can kind of target certain areas. A toothbrush works good, but it's a broader spray. It's a much broader pattern that it puts out, which would be good for something like this because I'm doing the whole area. But I want to just put some of this little spatter. So it looks like we got a very light snowfall coming down. Kind of makes you want to sing Jingle Bells. Dashing through the snow. So you're going to have to determine whether you want a lot of snow or just a little. But you want to do the whole canvas. Okay, that's looking pretty good. All right. I'm going to say that's a wrap, but before we close, I'm going to show you how to sign this with a liner brush. I've had a lot of questions of people asking on how to sign a painting, so I'm going to show you that. Now, don't you think you can do that? That's a very simple little painting, very few tools. The key is starting out with a nice thick paint underneath and just thinning it down. That way you can get so much paint layered onto that canvas. It's a wonderful approach. So don't be afraid to give that a shot. And check out my website, wilsonbickford.com. I've got tons of info and a newsletter information and stuff on there that you can sign up for. Okay, as far as signing this, use a color of your choice. Usually it's recommended to use something within the painting. I'm probably going to use maybe some of this darker green stuff here. I've got quite a bit here on my palette. It's got some spatter on there. It's not going to hurt a thing. This is my number 2 script liner. I have 3 liners in my series. There's a number 2 script liner, which is this one. There is a number 2 detail liner, which is about the same length, a little shorter, but much broader girth for different larger areas for where you need liner work. And I have a long script liner. This is just the regular number 2 script liner. It's made of synthetic hair. I use this with acrylics when I do my acrylic underpaintings for underneath my oils too. So you can use it for both mediums. I'm going to roll this brush. Notice how thin I've got that. I'm using quite a bit of the paint there. You got to get it thinned right down almost like milk. And I roll the brush. And I'll say right here in this corner. I'm going to put this up a little higher because my easel's in the way, but put it up high enough where your frame won't crop it out, but not right up in the middle of your painting either. And don't be afraid to put your name on there. Some people put it so small and minuscule, you have to hunt for it. I'm kind of proud of what I do, so you know what? I want everybody to know. Don't be afraid to put your name in lights, as they say. That's what it's all about. See, if you get that paint thin enough, it'll flow right off that brush. You're not going to ever get your name all in one loading. Notice I'm reloading several times to get across here. But you got to get it thin enough, and you'll be able to do that just like that. Well, thanks for joining me. I hope you really enjoyed this lesson. I'm hoping to catch you in a workshop somewhere along the way. And don't forget to check out my full-length DVDs. I've got a bunch of them out with different mediums, not different mediums, but different themes, rather. Of landscapes and florals and all kinds of stuff, ocean scenes. So don't be afraid to check those out, and I hope to see you again. Thanks for tuning in.